My name is Srivatsan, and I'm going to present optimal flexible consensus and its application to Ethereum. This is joint work with my colleagues Joachim, Lei, and my advisor David. Okay, good, this works. Okay, and this paper is forthcoming in the Oakland conference this year. All right, so what's flexible consensus? So as most of you might know already, classic consensus protocols, things like Hotstuff, Tendermint, Streamlit, or Casper FFG in Ethereum, all of these are secure up to 1/3 adversary. So they're secure if less than 1/3 of the validators are adversarial. Recently, there's been some concern around the fact that Lido, a liquid staking collective, already controls 1/3 of the stake in Ethereum. And so there may be some clients like Alice who think that it's better to improve the safety, prevent double spends even if 1/3 validators turn out to be adversarial, even if that is at the expense of liveness, even if that's at the expense of waiting longer to transact. So this Alice here is a safety favoring client. On the other hand, there are other clients like Bob who say, let's not reduce liveness further. Right? So Bob is a liveness preserving client. And these sort of different preferences come from different applications running on the blockchain. So for example, Alice here runs a cryptocurrency exchange. And Alice receives a large deposit and asks, when is it safe to make this large deposit available for withdrawal and prevent this transaction from ever getting reverted? And Bob may have a different use case. He interacts with optimistic rollup, let's say, where you need not only the safety of the main chain, but also the liveness in order for fraud proofs of the rollup to go through. So what is flexible consensus? There are these two different users with different security preferences, and how do we design one protocol that caters to both their preferences? Right? So with that, I'll get into a more formal description of the model. So we have some set of validators and clients that interact with the system. These clients send some transactions. The validators run a distributed protocol among themselves, report back to the clients, and each client confirms a sequence of transactions, which we call a log. Now, the model does incorporate network delays and network partitions. So more technically, it's a partially synchronous network. And importantly, F fraction of these validators can be adversarial. So typically, when you talk about consensus protocols, you want a liveness and safety properties. So in the case of flexible consensus, these are the properties you want. So liveness means for all transactions input to the validators, eventually for all clients, this transaction is a part of their log, but only if the fraction of adversarial validators, F, is smaller than liveness resilience that is chosen by the client K. So each client chooses their own liveness resilience. Similarly, safety means that if you take any two clients, K and K prime, across all time, their logs have to be consistent. And consistent means that one of them is a prefix of the other. And again, this you need to hold when F is less than the safety resilience is chosen by both the clients. And so you can see that each client chooses a liveness resilience and a safety resilience. And relating back to the classic consensus protocols, in that setting, basically for all clients, you have the same resilience pairs. And for all clients, the liveness and safety resilience are both equal to 1/3. And 1/3 is the optimal threshold that you can achieve when you want equal safety and liveness resilience. Right, so if I were to plot this, on one axis the liveness resilience and on one axis the safety resilience, then the classic protocols are at this point, where you get 1/3 liveness resilience and 1/3 safety resilience for all clients. So remember Bob, who is the client with who wants liveness, he's happy. But Alice, the one who wants more safety, not happy. So in these protocols, you can actually play a trick, which is you can reparameterize the quorum threshold that's used to make decisions in the protocol. And if you increase the quorum threshold in the protocol, then you get higher safety and lower liveness, but for all clients at the same time. So in such a protocol, Alice would be happy, but Bob would not be happy, right? So these protocols are not flexible in the sense that all clients get the same resilience, no matter which parameters you use. And in fact, there is a classic split brain argument from DLS 1988 and several others, which show that for any client, their liveness and safety resiliences must satisfy this inequality. Okay, this pointer doesn't work anyway. Okay, now you see it. Great. So that means that any resiliences in this region we know are impossible to achieve. Okay, so now there are these couple of papers that introduce the idea of flexible consensus. And so these papers propose a protocol that allows different clients to choose different resilience pairs on this green line here. So that means that Bob, who was liveness preserving, gets to maintain 1/3 liveness and 1/3 safety resilience. At the same time, Alice gets safety up to 2/3 of the validators being adversarial at the expense of no liveness, right? And so Bob is happy, and Alice is somewhat happy because she got higher liveness, but not all the way there. And if you wanted to give Alice more safety, you can play the same trick I told you earlier of reparameterizing the quorum threshold globally. And that could give you a different protocol where everyone's safety increases and liveness decreases. Okay, so Alice is happy and Bob is somewhat happy, right? So these protocols are, again, they give you some flexibility, but not all the way. And so the question we asked in this work is, what's the maximum flexibility a protocol can provide, and how? And so our answer is this family of protocols.
I have a question about the definition.
Yeah.
So for instance, if I favor liveness but I'm actually in some petition and I go for liveness later on, I will become inconsistent when our petition heals. What's the security definition in this case?
Okay, so liveness is like the usual partial synchrony definition of liveness, where liveness you only want after GST. That's something I didn't specify very formally. And safety you want even to hold under network partition, which is the usual definition under partial synchrony.
So there can still be no liveness if it's...
Yes, before GST there may not be liveness for anyone. That's true. Okay. So what we achieve in these protocols is that any client can choose their liveness and safety resilience on this purple line. And that means, the line is right at the boundary of the impossible region, so this must be optimal flexibility. Hence the name OFlex, right? And so here, every client is as happy as they can ever hope to get. So with that, I'll get into a brief description of what this protocol looks like. We look at the simple example where there are just these two clients, Alice and Bob, with the specific resiliences we have been seeing so far. So, a simple way to construct this protocol is, let's start with any classic consensus protocol that is designed for 1/3 safety and liveness resiliences. So any such protocol. Let's call this one the base protocol. And then on top of this protocol, we apply some additional actions that the validators will do, which we call as post-vote and permalock. What does this mean? So, the first protocol here, the base protocol, gives you certain chain that it outputs. And whenever this chain grows, the validator broadcasts a post-vote message. A post-vote is nothing but, it's post-vote because it's vote after the protocol, and it's a signature on this chain that the validator saw. Not only does it send this post-vote message, it locks onto this chain. And that means that the lock means that if ever it were to happen that the base protocol forks, that may happen if the adversary exceeds 1/3, right? And if that were to happen, then the validator will not post-vote or will not switch its lock to the other chain. So that's what the notion of a permanent lock here is. That's all. That's all that the validator does. And the other ingredient here is that each client chooses its own quorum threshold based on its safety and liveness preferences for when to decide a chain as confirmed. So, for example, Bob, who is liveness preserving here, will confirm a chain when it has seen votes, when it has seen post votes by at least 2/3 of the validators. Whereas Alice, who is more safety favoring, will wait for all the validators to post vote before confirming. So a quorum threshold of 1. So that's it. The two ingredients, the validators do this additional post vote and permalock, and then the clients use their subjective quorums. So quick intuition about why this achieves the safety and liveness. So if you look at Alice, the reason she achieves higher safety is two reasons. One is the permalock prevents honest validators from ever doing a post vote for these two conflicting chains. And given that, now if you want a quorum, like Alice waits for a quorum of all validators. So if ever there are two quorums for both the chains, then it must be that literally every validator is adversarial. And similarly, you can look at liveness. So here in this example, you can note that Alice wants a liveness resilience of 0. So Alice wants liveness only when everyone is honest. And in particular, that means less than 1/3 are adversarial, right? And so the base protocol is already safe and live in that scenario. And so, the base protocol never forks like this. So basically, whatever comes out of the base protocol, every honest validator does a post vote on that, and so it preserves liveness for Alice in that scenario. So that's a quick overview of the protocol. If you have more clients with different preferences here, then you just add, each client just chooses their own quorum to decide locally when to confirm a chain without affecting what the validators do. Okay, so here I showed you sort of a generic construction that applies on top of any classical consensus protocol to provide optimal flexibility, and we do so by adding this post-vote and permalock, which is what the validators do, and by adding client-specific confirmation rules, which clients do locally. Now, in the paper, we also have we also observed that for many protocols which follow sort of a chained PBFT-style protocol, examples include Hotstuff, Streamlit, Tendermint, and Ethereum's Casper. In all these protocols, you can reuse existing votes of the protocol to serve as post votes, because these protocols have block, vote, and so on, and you can reuse a vote for the next block as a post vote for the current block. And so therefore, you need no additional messages in order to achieve optimal flexibility. And it turns out that in the case of Ethereum, not only can you reuse existing votes, but there's actually an existing performance optimization in the implementation of the validators, which also doubles as the permalock. A little bit in detail, whenever a validator in Ethereum considers a certain chain as confirmed or finalized, it will just ignore any blocks that are not on that chain. And so if you ignore the block, then definitely you don't post vote for it, so you get a permalock. And so in case of Ethereum, all that you need to implement optimal flexibility is that each client chooses its own confirmation quorum to locally. And so there you need no system-wide changes, which is great for adoption. And so we made a proof of concept implementation of client that uses its subjective confirmation rules. Sort of the practitioner's perspective here is that as you increase safety resilience, you suffer confirmation latency on an average, but it's not too much more. And I want to emphasize that this is sort of ready for adoption because you need no system-wide changes on Ethereum, so clients can right away choose to adopt these new confirmation rules and they get higher safety. Right on time, and this is time for questions.
So is it different from like a simple approach is like you can just run an existing protocol like Streamlit or hot stuff, and every client, if I have a higher value transaction, I'm going to wait for more signatures. If I have a small transaction buying coffee, I'm going to just wait for 2/3 signature. Like,
yeah,
is
so
this any better than this naive approach?
As you're saying, the simple idea would be just run Streamlit, and each client chooses that confirmation quorum. That's actually exactly this protocol from these papers. But that only gets you up to 2/3 safety. And the reason is because the replicas or the validators are still using a 2/3 quorum to make decisions. So if the adversary has controls 2/3 validators, then it can create a new quorum and now force honest validators also to vote on its chain. And so you no longer have the property that honest validators will not vote for both the chains. Then your whole quorum intersection argument fails after that. Does that make sense?
No, not really.
Yeah, so one way of explaining it is, if you have more than 2/3 adversarial validators, then the adversary alone has power to create a quorum, right? And Streamlit would say that honest validators vote on the longest notarized chain. Now the adversary has basically bypassed the longest notarized chain by creating an alternate notarized chain. And so the adversary can force honest validators to vote on both the chains. Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to discuss later.
Hi, thanks for a nice talk. This might be a question that's more about flexible protocols in general and less about OFLEX specifically, I'm not sure. But my understanding of sort of the classic BFT consensus is that your notion of safety is that all of the honest participants in the system end up with the same view as each other. And if we've got different thresholds here, then it's very reasonable, in fact expected, that different clients within the system will need to have different views of what is confirmed and what isn't. And so it seems like we have to modify the view at the system level of what we're actually agreeing to include like how many people voted for it or something like that. Can you dive a little bit more into that and how that has to change?
So so looking back at the safety definition, right? So I'm saying that the safety property holds between two clients only if both of them choose correct safety resiliences, right? If the adversary happens to be less than both their safety resiliences. And so what would happen is, let's say the adversary is more than 1/3, and then you have some clients that chose a 1/3 safety resilience. These guys may no longer have safety in the sense that their views may diverge.
And so we're looking at it from the client's perspective now,
yes,
rather than the perspective of an honest validator. And
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that helps. Thank you.
Yes.
So one quick question. Like in practice, let's say I choose 80% and actually there's only 2/3 and everyone else is going with 2/3. Like wouldn't I just give up and choose 2/3 and everyone would just end up choosing the same threshold anyway? Like I don't want to be permanently left behind everyone else, right?
Okay, so if the scenario you are saying is where there are 2/3 adversarial validators, you chose 80% safety resilience. And so in this scenario, what would happen is your view just lags behind those that had 2/3 quorum, right?
But is there any like a chance for me to ever catch up? Like if everyone, I mean, if really in the real world there's only 2/3 honest, I'm never going to catch up. I'm just going to give up and use a uniform threshold as everyone else anyway.
Yeah. So what would happen here is, if the adversary actually created, if the adversary was more powerful than 1/3 and it did create a fork in the initial protocol, then this might cause the sort of validators to